Traders, how are you? Marcello here, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happens in the markets last week. We're here in South Korea. You guys can see the famous Gangnam Style statue. Kind of enjoying the city. We had an event here for some of our traders, and tomorrow we're going to be heading to the Philippines as we need to organize the new trading center that we're opening up over there. Really excited about that. I always get this question when I talk about the trading centers. We do most of our trading online, just so you guys know. We just keep that in mind. But you know, the vision long term would be to open up these trading centers around the world. Overall this week, the main thing that affected the markets was the attack on the Saudi Arabia infrastructure, the oil infrastructure. On Sunday at the market open, because if you guys know, the futures markets open at 6 p.m. on Sunday, right? Just so you know, they went up, they had their biggest one-day rise in history, which was over 15%, if I'm not mistaken. I'll find the number here in just a moment for you guys. On Monday, the markets headed lower because of that attack. Thursday, the markets overall recovered due to the resumption of trade talks between the US and China. And then on Friday, the US stocks dipped because of the Chinese farming delegation canceled their trip to Montana in the United States, which obviously affects the trade talks. I'm not going to mention too much about the trade talks because obviously one week they're on, the other week they're off. It kind of goes back and forth through the Brexit. I don't know if you guys have noticed, I kind of stopped talking so much about the Brexit because it goes back and forth until they actually make a decision. But that really affected the markets this week. We had a little bit of volatility because of that. So I wanted to mention that to you guys. U.S. indices for the most part are lower. The Dow is down 1.06%, the S&P 500 0.50%, and the NASDAQ down 0.73%. In overseas market news, one of the biggest things that happened is the Sensex in India went up 5.3% after the country cut their corporate rates on companies, meaning that it used to be 30% tax rate for corporations. It went down to 22%, which it relates to about a $20.5 billion tax cut. European markets mostly mixed. Istanbul, the emerging market, is a little bit more volatile than others, went down 2.83%, the biggest loser in Europe. And the winners were generally small, right? Like 0.2, 0.5, 0.7, so we won't mention them by name. In Latin American markets, the biggest winner, mostly higher. The biggest winner was Mexico at 1.68%. In Africa and Middle Eastern markets, Egypt was the biggest loser at 2.5%. Saudi Arabia at 1.1% positive. And in Asia, the Far East, the Hong Kong markets went down by 3.48%, and the South Korea Kospi went up 2.10%. For all my traders in the Philippines that we're going to see this weekend, the Philippines went down by 1.54%. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, which is on the US dollar since 1979, country of just 75,000 in population, could soon issue a sovereign currency in a digital form using the blockchain technology. This is what I have been telling you guys for a very, very long time. And then another thing that happened with Germany as well is the cryptos, the digital currencies might still exist, right? You can still buy them or sell them even though they're not regulated. There's been a lot of theft and things like that, fraud obviously as well. But what's going to happen, for example, if all the countries in the world, the biggest economies, let's say, you have a euro coin, a dollar coin, a Brazil coin, a China coin, and then they make all the cryptos like Bitcoin and all the others illegal. And they say, well, you can only use the digital currencies that we supply instead of the ones that are out there on the market. What's going to happen then? And I've been saying this for a long, long time. You guys can see that this is actually starting to manifest, and that's one of the reasons why I love to do these videos, so you guys can really understand what things mean, not just what the talking heads say, right? Because obviously there was a huge boom. Bitcoin, as I predicted, is the biggest now bubble in history, bigger than Tulip Mania. I got reamed when I said that, and even though it actually did happen. Now, Germany also is saying, the finance minister, that, quote, a core element of a state's sovereignty is the issuance of currency. We will not allow private companies to do it. And they say that the ambition of Facebook's Libra will threaten a core government function, which is monetary policy. And that's one of the other things that I always told you guys as well, is I don't believe that countries, the way that they maintain control is through the financial system. I don't think they're going to just let go of that. Joe, yeah, sure, Bitcoin, go ahead, just take over that. It's not going to happen. And you guys can see now that this is starting to manifest as I predicted it. Bitcoin, went down 0.66%. It got to 10,146.30 cents. In finance and banking news, the Fed, the Central Bank of the United States, as predicted by everybody, not just by me, that they are going to drop their interest rates by 0.25% from 2% to 1.5%. Essentially, it's a baseline range between 1.75 to 2. The Swiss National Bank as well, it's keeping its policy interest rate and also its deposit rate at a negative 0.75% overnight, avoiding a global move that's seen as a monetary loosening. Both the ECB and the Fed, ECB is the European Central Bank, announced that as well. If you guys remember last week, we talked about that. And unlike other rival banks, Norway, their central bank actually raised their interest rates by 0.25 to 1.5. They stated that the underlying inflation is reaching their target and their growth in Norway is actually pretty solid. In commodities this week, the U.S. crude was up 5.85%. International crude, which is called Brent, went up by 7.32%. Largest weekly price hike in 8 months. Obviously, the biggest single intraday rise was 15.5%. I had that number correct due to obviously the fact that supposedly Iran was one that attacked the infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. Trump also authorized a release from the Oil Strategic Reserve. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but during the oil embargo years ago, the U.S. kind of realized that they need to have a backup just in case the cutoff from oil happened. Even though right now the U.S. is the biggest exporter of oil in the world, they actually started exporting oil again. So we're not relying on anybody else for our energy, whereas before we had to import it. So we were basically held by the neck by a lot of these countries, where now we're not. He did allow, they created essentially a huge reserve of oil that can be tapped in times of emergency. So Trump announced basically that he's going to allow that to be tapped in this situation if needed. Saudi Arabia is cutting back production this summer as part of an OPEC effort to boost prices. Saudi Arabia, the reason why they're important, so you guys know, it's 10% of the global oil supply at about 100 million barrels per day. And obviously the loss of 5.7 million barrels per day, which was the attack that was done on their infrastructure, it's near 5% of the world's total output. Yemen's Iranian-aligned Houthi rebels claim responsibility for their act, but Saudi Arabia says it was Iran's fault, and they have supposedly proof that proves it. U.S. prosecutors took unusually aggressive turn in investigation and price fixing at J.P. Morgan. It's identifying their precious metals trading desk as a criminal enterprise operating inside the bank for nearly a decade. They're saying that they manipulated the precious metals markets, which is what I've been telling you guys for a long time. The markets now, if you're going to learn how to invest or trade, you really have to be able to understand the manipulation, because otherwise you're just going to get run over. Gold went up 1.95%. Silver, just when I was waiting for a few entries on the positions that I've talked to you guys about, the Iranians have to ruin it for me, but eventually it'll come back down. And if you guys do want me to do that video that I always that I've talked about, the silver video, or what I'm looking for, I showed you guys what I was looking for before, how I recorded it, went right to the area that I was looking for. I'll definitely record that video if you guys want me to. Remember, this is for educational purposes only. This is not investment advice. We don't trade people's money. We're not trading advisors, so keep in mind of that. Political news: Israel's election is too close to call on Wednesday. It's showing a tie between Minister Netanyahu and the rival. There's no single party majority, so it might take a few weeks in order to go ahead and create a new government. And Netanyahu, which is 69 years old, is the longest serving Israeli leader who's seeking his record 5th term. Spain, which is the 4th largest economy in the Eurozone. Socialism, not the biggest. Germany, capitalism is the biggest. Just kidding. But that's actually true. They're on track to have their 4th election in 4 years. Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau is saying that he's asking forgiveness after the whole scandal with the blackface. He's upcoming for election, so obviously that's going to affect him as well, even though he did apologize for that, and he said that there might be some other pictures that show up as well. 5 weeks away from the actual elections. U.S. manufacturing output increased more than expected in economic news in August by 0.5% versus the 0.2% forecast. It boosted on a surge of machinery and primary metals production. U.S. home building surged to a 12.3-year high in August. The seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.364 units for both single and multifamily housing units. Essentially what that means is that there's probably not going to be a recession this year. Argentina, which is South America's second largest economy after Brazil, third largest economy after Brazil, and Mexico, just a little asterisk, Colombia is the fourth largest economy in the region. They had a contraction in their economy by 2.6% in 2019, over 50% over 50% annual inflation rate, and the peso, which is their currency, actually devalued by 2/3 against the dollar since the start of 2018. It's hurting obviously both imports and consumption. Corporate news, U.S. pharmaceutical giant Purdue Pharma files for bankruptcy protection. They reached a tentative deal to be able to settle over 2,600 lawsuits alleging that they did help the U.S. opioid epidemic. Basically, what's going to happen is they're going to put it in a trust that's going to be controlled by the states and cities and the counties that want to recoup the losses or the damages that they're saying that they caused. E-cigarettes now, government imposed a nationwide ban on e-cigarettes. So a lot of companies like Walmart, Amazon, and also e-commerce companies are now getting rid of their e-cigarettes online. In trade news, China's economy is facing an increasing pressure from a slowing global growth. A lot of other things like the trade war, protectionism, and also a trade deal with China is looking to be less likely due to the fact that the Democrats actually support the tariffs and the trade war. I shouldn't say the trade war. They support the tariffs that Trump is placing on China. U.S. President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Abe are actually negotiating, I should say, a deal between the United States and Japan. In technology, a 27-month experiment deliberately releasing genetically modified mosquitoes in Brazil. They're reporting that it actually failed and they may have created super mosquitoes. The Yale report is saying, when are we going to stop messing with nature? It was so funny because in the article, they created this new mosquito so when they mate, the offspring were going to be duds, right? They couldn't mate or they couldn't have kids, right? Like birth control, think of it. And so then the mosquitoes don't mate with those and they mate with other ones. It's like, come on, guys. I'm sure, the genetics of some of the offspring maybe changed as well for this kind of, we're playing God here. But anyway, other than that, Chinese Huawei is launching what may be the world's smartest 5G phone on Thursday in Europe. The real question is going to be whether consumers are actually going to buy the device because it's not going to have access and software to Google products and services. Facebook is teaming up with a company called Luxottica to be able to develop an augmented reality Ray-Ban smart glasses codename Orion. It's going to take a few years to develop, probably be ready by 2023, 2025, and they want the sunglasses to be able to take calls, have a smart display, live stream, and even allow for a smart AI assistant. In investment news, US UAW, which is, the workers' union, United Automotive Workers, I believe is what it means. Essentially, a big group of the employees of GM are going on strike. It's going to cost GM $400 million a day. They have enough inventory for about a week or two, but it's going to be a problem because obviously they went on strike because they couldn't negotiate a deal. So we'll see how that works out. World's biggest tax case is going to begin proceedings this week. Apple is contesting the decision made by the EU to make them pay $14.3 billion in tax. They're actually saying that their agreement with how they bring their money into Ireland allows them to pay a lot less tax than normal. So obviously they want them to pay those back taxes. And in international events, President Trump orders an increase in sanctions towards Iran. and its central bank. Saudi Arabia is displaying remnants of drones and missiles, saying that it's directed from Iran. Turkish President Erdogan is saying on Wednesday that they're planning a safe zone in northern Syria east of the Euphrates, which can house anywhere between 2 to 3 million refugees. The question is, are people or the refugees from Europe really going to want to come back now to Syria and live in the middle of nowhere? Other than that, the Philippines is working on stemming the worst dengue outbreak since 2012. There's been over 271,000 cases of dengue reported since January to August 31st of this year. They declared a national pandemic. Unfortunately, just over 1,100 people died, 50% of which are kids, children. And unfortunately, I'm going to be in Philippines starting tomorrow, so I'll have to be careful. And also, in unusual facts, Indonesia, which is the world's most populous Muslim majority country with a lot of religious minorities, is saying that they're going to pass a new penal code which is going to criminalize consensual sex out of marriage. How unfortunate for you guys. And it's going to introduce stiff penalties for insulting the president's dignity, and it's a move that the civil groups say it's an intrusive assault of basic freedoms. The pig-killing disease, African swine fever, is predicted to wipe out 20% of the world's meat's protein by the end of the year. It's actually spread now through Asia, with South Korea being the latest country reporting the outbreak. This actually might be a bigger story than the trade war with the US and China. And it's spread all across Southeast Asia, parts of Europe, and also been found in Africa as well. Mitsubishi Corp is saying that a rogue oil trader in a Singapore unit lost $320 million in unauthorized transactions in oil. Now you guys know why we need to have so many restrictions with the speed up trader accounts, because obviously we don't want anybody to lose that kind of money. Other than that, Lim Chow Kiat, the CEO of Singapore's GIC, one of the world's largest wealth funds in the world, is saying that he's warning that the markets are increasingly dire and also face an uncertain future due to the economic environment that we're in, and also other things, politics, protectionism, and other things like that. And other than that, hundreds, if not thousands of students across the world are protesting on the street to be able to go ahead and demand world leaders to do something about the climate, saying that obviously we should have tougher laws and adopt urgent measures to avert a supposed environmental catastrophe. That's the news from this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We'll see you next week.